I think one word and theme that has come up again and again is community. And I know earlier I used the Sanskrit word Kalyana Mitra, which really, I don't know, actually, John, the translation is Dharma friend.
Yeah, Dharma friend, spiritual friend.
Spiritual friend. And, it's interesting because looking at environmental psychology, we know that possibly the most positive thing we can be doing in this moment of crisis is to be part of a community, to be part of building community. And it is very easy to come in as an individual to different teachings and gatherings. But Upaya, this place is particularly sacred in seeding community. And so one of the requests I have for you is to see this as an opportunity. You are finding each other. You are coming here to build Kalyana Mitras that will last this lifetime and beyond, right? And what came to me very strongly this morning was just the immense gratitude I have for my Kalyana Mitras. I met Roshi and John in 2010 under the auspices of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So clearly it was going to go well. Just that they have been elders to me and deep spiritual friends and guides for me. And that the Loka initiative, which I created at UW-Madison, actually came to be here at Upaya a few years ago, where we had the three of us met after many years with Richie Davidson. And we have been these lifelong friends, you could say, past life friends that are coming together again. And in all of this humor and sort of the fractiousness and the argumentativeness, which I'm sure all of you have witnessed, which is also very Tibetan, actually, in tradition, this sort of constant poking. Are you enlightened and are you not enlightened? And a constant thing going on. Actually, the Loka initiative as an idea was seeded here at Upaya. And to me, it's such a manifestation of the word tamsi, the samaya we have, right? And the importance of trusting our purest aspirations. We who've come here together to think about, to dream together how we're going to serve in this time of crisis. That aspiration aims us true to find the Kalyana Mitras we need. And I wish you what I received here at Upaya, which is this friendship and the deathly seriousness and the humor, right? And this tenderness that we get to hold for one another and we get to share. It's ever growing. It is not something that we need to be possessive about. It's not something that's limited to our relationship. It's something that just, because it comes from this pure aspiration, it brings everybody else in, right? And that is Loka. Loka brings everybody else in because of this beautiful example I have of how you create family, how you create spiritual family. And so I think that is what I wanted to say, that what you see in front of among the three of us is in many ways also a manifestation of suffering. All three of us have experienced deep suffering. And that ability to be vulnerable, that ability to share suffering without thinking it makes us weaker. That ability to say, I am vulnerable and weak and I'm, maybe not flourishing where I am. Do you have any ideas, right? That also is part of the process and the path. And yeah, I want to express my deep gratitude to both of you for giving me that.
And this is so, I think we're going to start with this morning is a little bit about community, connection and such. But I also just want to say that, I've known Roshi for 20 years or more, and it's been an incredible, not just friendship, but mentorship, actually, that I really value very, very much. And we also have a lot of fun. And I do think that, and which is, I think, very important, especially when you're dealing with really tough things, actually. Yeah. We were talking this morning how there's a certain kind, in the Tibetan world, there's a certain kind of suspicion of teachers who are really serious. Like if you don't know how to laugh, that's like, it's like, even in the face of the worst, the worst kind of samsaric suffering that we're seeing, to be able to, in a sense, maintain the joy that Dekila has been talking about. Part of her name means joy, actually. That to maintain that joy is critical. That's not to say that one dismisses the suffering or turns one's head away, but that even in the face of the suffering, that there's a kind of deep joy, which comes, I think, from that sense of being in community, of friendship, actually, of deep friendship. And of course, along with the Tibetan tradition of teasing, which I think appears to be a Zen tradition as well, as far as I know.
Absolutely.
And
if you can't be teased,
it's a bad sign.
You got a problem. I just remember being on the trail in the Himalayas and falling down and having all the Nepalis laughing at me. And the first time that happened, I was so affronted.
Yes.
I was like humiliated, and I personalized it, and I thought, they've lost total respect for me. And I actually, went, no, I didn't actually, but, I thought, well, that's weird. They're all laughing at me. And, I've broken, this was in 1999. I've broken a bone in my foot and they're all laughing. And then I realized, oh yeah, they're laughing. That's great. And the next thing I know, I got handed a flask that had, Rakshi in it, which had cured me of pain temporarily. And I was given, a large boot to, walk in, which didn't match my other boot. And so I looked ridiculous and they all laughed. And so this is, and also in my Zen friends, my colleagues, Zen master, mistress world, Ankyo Roshi and I are really bad. I mean, you have no idea. We are like hens cackling at each other. And I'll tell you one Ankyo Roshi story. We were in a kind of a rock motel up at 13,000 feet, hand-to-hand combat with bed bugs. And
God,
and
that's
she
not
got
good.
ready for bed. And she put on a pair of tights that had, sort of black and white stripes, and she looked like she was a bumblebee, And I started howling, and then she started. Anyway, part of, our interactions are naturally arising after years of friendship, but also we've been influenced by the cultures that we have been part of. That are not the Protestant cultures that I was brought up in, or the Catholic culture that John was brought in, where there's a kind of ponderousness. But actually, Buddhism, it's heavy, but it's also filled with play. And it's filled, the highest respect that one receives is not, a serious look from the Dalai Lama, but it's when His Holiness takes hold of Richie Davidson's nose and pulls it, even longer. And that is the highest compliment you can receive from His Holiness, that kind of free intimacy. And this is, apropos of your question, Barbara, around, how do you engender a system that is nimble, robust, emergent, that is characterized by, many parts, but all those parts are in the interbeingness of, a totality where it doesn't shrink in relation to threat, but it meets threat with both stability and flexibility. And these characteristics have to be instantiated in the context of our practice. It's what is called the Bodhisattva attitude. It reflects our character. When you're in a rigid system, then you're actually in a system that is characterized by fear. The undergirding is fear of loss of identity, loss of stability. But if you know that everything is characterized by impermanence, that, you know, everything, it's every moment is new. Like, who the heck knew the Berlin Wall was going to come down? Or, you know, 2001, you know, the trade towers come down. Or, you know, it's how do you actually meet change fearlessly and with curiosity, and how do you instantiate that into a system? And it's really hard because the ego is so wanting fake stability. And, you know, that is expressed within systems, but also within our individual psychology. And so the Bodhisattva attitude, you know, has this ability to not project catastrophe, but to be, you know, incredibly in the moment, knowing, like Bernie said, and somebody cited that ethos or that view yesterday, really sitting with not knowing, with this radical openness, with beginner's mind, like, you know, going back to Noah, who's been, you know, we walked the path for, I don't know, 14, 15 years together, and being able in 24 hours to go online when the pandemic hit, and just boom, like that. Or the joke, what makes God laugh? Plans. You know, all of our plans just were like, boom, out the window. And then how do you respond? And that is the training of bodhisattvas. That openness, nimbleness, curiosity, resting in not knowing, bearing witness, which is the connection, the experience of samadhi or connection with things as they are, not as you wish they were, right? Because let me tell you, you will be angry because our anger arises really out of the sense of insecurity, fear. And you'll shut down, and the bodhisattva is open. And this is, in a certain way, our relationship. The bodhisattva archetype is not just a relationship at the individual level. It's at the organizational level. It's at the interpersonal level. And this is how some of us play together. You know, it's emergent. You know, we'll have a structure, but everything is contingent upon context and what is happening in any given moment.
And actually that, you know, let's just say I was department chair became department chair just as the pandemic was getting rolling. And let's just say we were a little less flexible in our capacity to pivot, you know, and because it's a big institution, but also very top down in many ways. And that is, you know, there's a lesson, what emergent systems are actually bottom up, right? The whole point of a complex dynamical system is that nobody's actually in charge. And most human systems actually are like that. People pretend to be in charge. My favorite example of this is one of the things I did in the 80s is I worked on sailboats for a while, and I had a job on a sailboat sailing it up from, as a crew member, up from the Virgin Islands up to the East Coast and Northeast Coast. And we stopped in St. Thomas. It was one of our first places we stopped. And I'd never been actually in any of that part of the world, you know, and even the captain, who was actually sort of kind of a, you know, someone that I had a little connection, personal connection to, was mentoring me and teaching me. But Paul Naplin was his name. His son was a friend of mine. Anyway, I get out, you know, I get off the boat and want to wander around St. Thomas a bit, get in a taxi. At that time, the taxis were all like old Chevrolet station wagons from like 62 or something, because they don't rust, right? So they can maintain them. And they're, of course, you know, left-hand, meaning you're driving, they're designed to be driven on the right side of the road. So the driver's on the left side, but they drive on the left side of the road because it used to be British. So we're going, I sort of never seen this. I sort of asked, you know, is he a mailman? Like, you know, I don't know. And then I asked the taxi driver, like, you know, why you have this car, but you're driving the left side? Well, we get the cars from the United States because we're part of the U.S. and we get, you know, deals on them. And they did actually try to change us to right-hand side of the road driving a few years ago. But, you know, it started at 6 a.m. in the morning, and by noon we were back. It's kind of like, no, you know, sure, top down, good luck. So that's a sign that cultural systems are not about, we're not going to change the system by taking over.
Yeah.
That is not going to work. Like we take over, all that does, so revolutions that take over just end up instantiating the same oppression. Just another way, you just change the names and the titles and then the oppression's the same. And, you know, Albert Camus in his book, L'Homme Révolté, The Rebel, you know, wrote about this in the 50s about, you know, he had hoped that, he didn't survive, maybe happily, to see that his hopes for the Cuban Revolution would be dashed. He was hoping that actually there'd be an authentic, you know, change where there wouldn't be the same kind of hierarchical, top-down, basically capitalistic approach to governing. And that didn't really work out in the end. And you know, has been an oppressive regime. So what that tells you is, you know, if you just get in charge, that doesn't mean you're going to change anything. So, and that's because cultural systems are actually emergent systems. Yeah. And the things make sense within those cultural systems, like driving on whatever side of the road, in a way that feels real, right? So, you know, Emile Durkheim talked about this. Durkheim's idea, the great sociologist, is that our very sense of what is real is given to us by our cultures. Yeah. And in fact, it's instilled through us through ritual processes that enable us to kind of experience the deepest sense of our communal reality. And so this just seems like the way things are supposed to be. It's not, you know, and our emotions can be like that, right? So there's a big question: how many are emotions universal? Are they cultural? There are people on different sides. Probably the truth is going to be somewhere in between, right? But you can say for sure there are some emotions that are really not universal, like disgust. I remember one time, when I was doing my doctoral research in Sarnath, and I was working with a wonderful pundit, the late Ram Shankar Tripathi, who was a very interesting traditional pundit, but also a practitioner of Dzogchen, the great perfection. And, you know, I had a cold, but he said, it's fine, you know, come on over and we'll still read the text. We were reading some Dharmakirti, I think, at the time. And, you know, I needed to, my nose was running. So I pulled out a handkerchief and I wiped my nose, and I noticed he couldn't help, because there are certain kind of features that indicate disgust. He couldn't help but look disgusted. Because the idea of like wiping snot off your face and putting it back in your pocket was just so disgusting to him. Because in India, what you do is you go to this. Well, it's just.
Thanks for sharing, John.
You go to the side of the road and you're like, you know, or you go to the sink or whatever, you know, and in some ways, actually, you don't have to wash handkerchiefs then, but we might find that disgusting. Right? So disgust is a very good example of a very culturally constructed emotion that feels incredibly real, right? Like certain things disgust us, and it just feels real that way. Likewise, we can have a sense that our emotions are in some sense like justified. And I think this is something that is very important for us to examine. It's actually kind of a confusing idea. So what Roshi was talking about, I've seen so many times with Tibetan monks, some young monk, you know, or not so young, you know, they'll be walking along, a group of them, somebody falls down and is clearly hurt or even bleeding. And the other monks are laughing, and they're laughing like, and then the guy on the ground, if he's still conscious, is, you know, is like, you know, starts to laugh as well. So, like, are they justified in laughing? Would the person on the ground be justified at getting angry? Would Roshi have been justified in getting angry?
I felt crushed, and I had to go see a therapist.
Yeah.
It was not a microaggression; it was a macroaggression.
Right? Would that be justified? Really? What do you think? So yes, exactly. Yeah. So justified means that my cognition, my account of the situation is correct.
Yeah.
So, for example, I fell down. Yes. They are laughing. Yes. But the way I react emotionally to a situation is not given by the situation itself. And this example shows that. I can choose, maybe not choose, my cultural conditioning, right? My personal history. I'm gonna have a tendency to have a certain kind of emotional reaction in a particular situation. But that doesn't mean that that emotional reaction is compelled. I've certainly met people who, when they're insulted, and I was actually in some ways trained in this. I'm not sure that I fully got the training, but you know, I've met people who, when they're insulted, they actually kind of look happy. Like, oh, thank you for giving me an opportunity to see like how much ego I have. They don't feel very clearly, certainly don't react with any anger. And they don't seem to be faking it. They're like, yeah, oh, no problem. Yeah, that's, yeah. And then it's like, oh, I'm sorry, did I do, what's wrong? You know, like concern, because if you're being insulted, it's because somebody's probably irritated at you and you want to know what's going on. Like, what can I do to, is there something I can help you with? So that reaction, like, as opposed to like, what are you talking about?
You're fired.
Yeah, right, you're fired. And you know, and these are actually meant to be one of the main opportunities, is especially when someone insults you or blames you for something you didn't do.
That's the best.
That is absolutely the best. Right? Apparently, Bob Thurman was someone who's an important mentor for me, and his teacher, Geshe Wangyal, was famous for this. Like, you know, you'd just be carrying a broken cup and he'd say, you just trying to destroy the Dharma by breaking the cups in the Dharma. I didn't break it. I don't care what you did. You know, it's like, and then they go, oh. And I'm not saying it's a method for everybody, right? But you don't have to, the idea that any particular emotional reaction is justified is actually a confusion. I can be correct or incorrect, so I could think, you know, again, Roshi stole my oatmeal, and which she does regularly, you know, I could believe that, and then I could get angry, and then I could turn out to be wrong. So my judgment that she stole the oatmeal was wrong, but the anger wasn't justified or unjustified. If she stole my oatmeal, I could get angry, or I could think, oh, gee, she must be hungry. I'm glad she had it before I did. You know, why do I have to get angry? Now, I'm not saying that anger is wrong. What it is, it's not right or wrong. It's appropriate or inappropriate, depending on your culture. So actually, for Roshi to get mad when they were laughing at her would have been inappropriate. Not wrong. It's not right or wrong. She was correct. They were laughing at her. She's correct. She broke her foot. It hurt. And she could choose culturally, because of our upraising, most of us would probably get angry. You know, so she could do that. But that wouldn't, getting angry wouldn't be right or wrong. It would just be appropriate or inappropriate culturally. And from a Bodhisattva's perspective, that's very important to know, like, what's the cultural context here? But the other big thing is, let's say you want to change the cultural context. You want to change the way people react. You don't want to be the one who perpetuates like a kind of negative way of dealing with those types of situations. Then you can even deliberately choose to have a different kind of emotional reaction. This takes training, but it's possible. And then the question is not really appropriate or inappropriate, but it's more like effective or ineffective. Is getting angry in this situation going to lead to the maximal benefit? Is this going to like carry along my Bodhisattva practice? And it's those types of changes, actually, which is here's where the parrot story for me also is, in some ways it's about, you know, don't expect a result, but it's also that the little tiny changes, like in chaos theory, the you know, the batting of the butterfly's wings, those little tiny changes that the Bodhisattva can do in their own behavior. You're not going to change society by taking over. You've got to change it by changing like the way dynamics
complex dynamical systems work is that the interactions of the components create the system. So if you want to change the system, you have to change the behavior of the components. You can't just legislate, compassion, for example. You've got to change that at the level of the components. And that's going to happen by influencing those components directly, right? So that's really key. And part of what that tells us about human culture, of course, is that, why do I react the way I do? Why don't I laugh when somebody falls? I have actually done that, and by mistake, because I've spent enough time with Tibetans that when somebody falls down, I have to keep myself from laughing. It's not always the right thing to do. The Bodhisattva has to, I'm not a great Bodhisattva, but I try, pay attention to local culture. And but like, why do I react the way I do? Why do I think my anger is justified? Why, why do I think that the way in which we accumulate wealth is the right way to do things? Why do I just like going along, like most of us? So how do we, what kinds of changes can we do? And this is where, as Dekila said, we got to find our niche. What can we change? But even the small changes that are influencing those components, right? Those are going to start to have an effect. Could take a while. What that does tell us about culture is that humans are cultural animals. So one of the ways, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about kind of the development of what we can call in groups and out groups. And do that for about 15 minutes, and then we're going to move on to some discussion a little bit more. Turn it back over to Roshi for a discussion of sort of more getting back into the history of the Bodhisattva activism. But yes, Chepchi?
John, I want to ask a question.
Can you, before you ask a question, can you just wait for this? Also about that too. You want to do it now, or do you want to do it and
Maybe after Chepchi.
you want to do it now?
Yeah.
No, I mean before I start.
John, I wanted to ask the question. I feel like I try very hard, not try very hard, but I really work at being a bodhisattva who listens, who is in the moment, who really cares for people. And I have my own children and community children, like young people who I'm friends with and neighbors, and they have reaction times that are so severe and violent almost. I don't want to see you again. Don't send me another email. I don't want to hear from you. I just don't even want you in my life. And I generally walk away and I hold it, and I don't cry usually. I could, but I don't. But what is the reaction that a bodhisattva should have? I think mostly just separating from it works, but I don't know.
Well, to really answer that question would take to need to know a lot more about the situation and the context. But I think, the two things, one of the things that Dekila has emphasized is that you've really got to know what your limits are. So, Shantideva says, if you, like in the Perfection of Generosity, there's a story of Aryadeva when, he's a bodhisattva thinking, I'm going to really try to practice generosity to the maximal. And then Mara, the trickster, shows up one day dressed, pretending, looking like a beggar, and says, a one-eyed beggar, and says, oh, I really like your right eye. It's so beautiful. And Aryadeva says, oh, thank you. And then, can I have it? And Aryadeva says, oh, okay. So he takes his eye out, hands it to Mara, and he looks at it and said, oh, it's actually quite ugly. And he smashes it on the ground.
Thanks for sharing, John.
Yes. And then Aryadeva, so these stories usually have a thing like a magical thing where the Bodhisattva, everything gets restored. There are a whole bunch of stories like this. But because Aryadeva regrets giving him the eyeball, he ends up as one-eyed. He's blind in one eye, which is why
His Holiness the Dalai Lama used to call Bob Thurman Aryadeva because Bob is just one eye. So, the point there is Aryadeva went too far. He wasn't ready to do that. You got to know what your limits are. But of course, the Bodhisattva goal here is to the extent possible, always be trying to cultivate compassion. Like, wow, it must be really tough to be a person who's that reactive.
Yeah.
It must be painful to, turn against your own parent. So those types of, attitudes that can help, even as just a thing you think, can eventually maybe help. But, it's a complex situation, and I can't really give you solid advice without knowing more. But yes, and then I do want to say a couple of things, but yes, go ahead.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Okay, yeah. And then Dekila will have a...
Taking my question. I think my follow-up question is what to do in this, am I doing this okay? A little lower?
You're fine.
Yeah.
In this time of climate crisis and like changing conditions for humans on the planet, what do we do when there's a need for like our limit to change, I guess? And how to be with that? Because I feel like both are true. Like it's important to be aware of and honor our limits and then recalibrate our limits for this time. And what does that look like in a way that's healthy? Yeah.
I'll do a quick response and then hand it over to Dekila, who also wants to say something else. But let me just say that part of the Bodhisattva vow that we will be taking later actually says that you're training progressively.
Yeah.
So the idea is not that you know your limits and like, that's it. This is, it's the so-called growth mindset. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. This is not fixed mindset. You're not, the whole idea here is you can become a Buddha, which means that you're going to get incrementally better. And in believing that is actually important. Like we are all trainable. We can all get better. And that's an extremely important thing, to have a trust in your own fundamental capacity for awakening. So yeah, yes, of course, we do need to get better, but we don't want to, because the problem is if we try to do something we're really not capable of, it's pretty guaranteed that it's not going to go well.
In the work, John, and what's your name?
Eleanor.
Hi, Eleanor.
Eleanor.
Okay, Eleanor. With clinicians, we have this perspective which we call self-stewardship. And self-stewardship involves us knowing our own limits, our own capacities, and having a respect for that, and knowing that those limits and capacities will change through time. And, if you overextend your situation, then you will be in a contraction. You won't be able to function in the same way with the kind of pliability that because you've pulled the rubber band too far to the point of breaking, and now it's just not working anymore. So that's why practice is such a powerful thing, because you get to explore your somatic, affective, and also cognitive capacities, and to have respect for those capacities, but also not to underestimate yourself. And this is the other part of the issue. You want to engage as an aspiring bodhisattva in a life or in actions or in engagement that is fundamentally life affirming. So when Glassman Roshi would sit with us in Auschwitz, and which was, just a completely devastating experience for most of us. I remember being in the Auschwitz Museum in the 90s, it's probably what I said.
I knew I had reached person. And this made me, and I was able to make it with myself. However, what you probably lost.
Yeah, we lost it.
That is so he's one of these staying in touch with your somatic, affective, and mental continuum is enhancing people and respecting the fact that you want to engage in a way that is life affirming also in relation to your own situation, but not indulgent. Indulgent is escape, or shutting down is escape. We want to just take a break while Noah.
They seem to be there, but not visible.
Yeah,
Because I saw somebody I know who's in it.
Yeah,
we're back
people.
now.
All right,
Yeah.
great.
I think one thing I wanted to add is that the beautiful part of impermanence is that there is no finished product.
Right.
We're in process. We individually are in process. We aspiring bodhisattvas are in process. The work we're doing is in process. It's in the doing, right? The systems we're trying to dismantle, systems we're trying to create, institutions we're trying to build, it's all process. And the moment we sink into that, what happens is you can sort of see your attachment and your desire for the finished product.
Yeah.
You see how badly you want things to look like and be like, how you want leadership to behave, how you want your friends to be, because those are all finished products. And that's so seductive to us because it gives us this kind of that attachment to stability, right? That attachment to want things to be stable in an uncertain world. But trusting impermanence, trusting that we are works in progress gives us so much freedom, because then what we're doing, instead of dismantling that system, is we are introducing new processes, ground up processes, emergent processes, right? We're introducing ways of communicating and learning and deep listening. And that may be all we are responsible for in this lifetime. That is more than enough. And it frees you from this endless pressure we put upon ourselves to transform things. Because what we're committing to is opening up processes that are fear-based within ourselves, in our communities, in our societies. Oh my gosh, that's more than enough, no? That's quite a bit. It's so ambitious. It is the Bodhisattva vow in action. And I think reminding ourselves that helps regulate our own emotions and what we carry. It helps regulate our expectations of our people, our community, our friends, our teachers. So the rigid ideas we have of how our teachers need to behave according to our expectations of what good teachers are, all of those things get to be fluid. And that is the key to adaptation, is allowing that fluidity to be there, to see that as the essence,
Yeah. And that can be hard because systems are, the system of a tornado is very, very unstable. And part of the reason it's very unstable is that the components of the system and of the air molecules have no freedom of action. So there can be no chaos in that system. So it can't really respond to environmental changes, so it collapses. So they're highly constrained. But, some cultures are more constrained and some are less constrained. And the capacity to kind of change is definitely inhibited by a kind of top-down process. It's not a process, leaders think they're in charge. They're not really in charge. It's a whole kind of entity that is the system itself. And it can be very challenging when, especially in systems that are more coercive
to change those systems, for the components to have new behaviors, right? And that's why, you know, when you see the tremendous courage that was shown by Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi, by Martin Luther King, you know, the kinds of suffering actually that the nonviolent change required in the people who were changing, who were the components of the system changing, and causing others to change, right? That was not easy because there was a lot of pushback, still is, of course. And what that tells us about cultural systems is, when we think about like what's a cultural system, so humans, you know, one kind of basic story, evolutionary story that's told, that's widely accepted, you know, the devil's in the details, but widely accepted, is that at some point we are different than other great apes and other primates. So some of our closest cousins are chimpanzees, for example. And the anthropologist Sarah Hrdy, who has contributed to this way of understanding things, you know, starts her book about mothers and others, the importance of kind of shared parenting in humans. She starts the book by saying, if you take 100, you know, it's quite regularly the case that 100 humans who don't know each other get on a plane. You know, they all get in line, even if they'd never been on a plane before, they kind of understand, oh, I got to get in line. They follow the other humans, and, you know, and they get on the plane. And rarely there's a little dispute, but certainly, you know, often there are people helping put the bags up, and everyone's on the plane and you're ready to go in time. If you took 100 chimpanzees who don't know each other and tried to do that, there'd be blood everywhere, is what Sarah Hrdy says, right? So why is that the case? That's because humans have first developed, who knows how, but genetically, we developed the capacity for a kind of social cognition that enabled a deep level of cooperation. Yeah. And that deep level of cooperation is not just about kind of, so our relatives, other great apes, have the capacity for what's called theory of mind. They can attribute like mental states or emotions to another chimpanzee. So if they see a chimpanzee looking at a banana, they can know, oh, you know, she wants that banana, right? But what they don't have is a capacity for a kind of what's called distributed cognition, right? Which is not just joint intentionality, like kind of dyadic between two, but a sort of shared group intentionality, where they can have a sense of being part of an entire group, and humans can actually do this, and we evolved somehow to be able to do this, our ancient ancestors, so that when humans do hunter-gathering, right, when they go out hunting or they're gathering, they can literally, like if I'm a chimpanzee and I'm trying to gather some food, I'm also like waiting for the predators, because I don't have in my mind a model of us as a group in which there are certain people whose role it is to guard. And that's all they're doing, is guarding. They're not gathering. And they do that, and they know that when we all come back together, we're going to be able to share. We're going to share our food, right? And we're going to survive together. So humans evolved to survive and thrive together, right? And the way we see this is, if you've ever seen like, you know, 5-year-olds play soccer, like, where's the ball? That's where all the kids are. They know, like, you're the goalie. Even the goalie sometimes is out there, you know, like, right? So that's how chimpanzees hunt. So they cooperate to a certain extent. But, you know, there's this sense in which, oh no, you know, like, there's no sense of a kind of group, the sense of the group, right? And that's what humans have, for our capacity to do that. And team sports are a very obvious example, but actually all of our kind of cultural reality, you drive down the highway and you are driving on the right side of the road and there are lines and you've been taught that, right? And then you just, like, it's not like you're waiting for the person on the other side to, you know, to first of all not know, or to just not do it, right? So what that tells us is that as humans, our cooperation depends upon a kind of shared reality, which is transmitted to us when we are born. And that evolves over time. And one of the main, this is called cultural evolution. And one of the main, and Joe Henrich, our friend at Harvard, who was with us with the Dalai Lama last year, is one of the main persons who's worked on this. And as culture evolves, one of the things that happened is, and there's again debate about exactly the details here, but basically humans started to be able to create societies in which they didn't know each other, but still felt like they were part of the same group. So previously, the hypothesis is that once you get above about 125, 150, the human mind, the brain evolved in this amazing way where you have this huge cortex, and one theory is we have that because of social cognition, so that we can do all of this. Like we can keep this kind of model of our group in our mind, and we can have many different people who are connected to us. But once we get to about 125, 150, we can't really quite hold together individual knowledge of people. So hunter-gatherer bands, hypothetically, have been restricted to about that size historically. So how do you get above that? You need some way of giving people a sense of being part of the same group without knowing that without seeing each other. So one of the things that facilitates that, of course, is language, but it's more than language. It's dress, it's diet, it's ways of greeting, it's even ways of moving, the way the body moves, right? It's, in my view, very easy to identify Americans when you're abroad, just by the way they walk, right? And certainly by the volume of their voice.
That's okay, John.
Yes. So, right? So that is, and I'm an American, kind of. So these things kind of permeate us, but then one of the biggest things that enables what's emergence of what's called large-scale societies is also kind of shared myth, you could say, a narrative, a story about who we are. And that story is often, if not always, connected to religion. And there's the story about who we are and where we're headed, and why we are all cooperating together, which is more than just about food now. It's about some kind of goal that our grand narrative gives us. And by the way, we have the true one. And these other people who have one that doesn't agree with ours, well, they're wrong. And as long as they stay out of the way, everything's cool. But if they get in the way, if they get in enough of the way, they're not taking our food. They're not taking our territory necessarily. Maybe impinging on it. They might actually speak a dialect of our language. They might look exactly like us, but we're going to die in order to kill them. Right? We're dying in a sense for a kind of abstraction. A nation, an ethnicity, right? A religion. So that is the idea. This is how large-scale societies have evolved. And so one question that I have, and when we think about this, how are we going to create new kinds of societies? One of the roles of Buddhism historically has been to critique this idea, that these ultimate things are actually real and true. Yeah. Because Buddhism emerges in India not as a mainstream religion. It's a critique of the mainstream religion. And even in Tibet, where it becomes mainstream, there's always this constant critique of the center. Like, yeah, you think that you're the absolute true whatever, Lama, whatever. Well, by the way, you don't really exist ultimately. And the Dharma doesn't exist ultimately either. The Buddha never taught anything to anyone, anytime, anywhere, any place. Not really, right? So how can the Dharma be ultimately true? So that critique, right, creates certain kinds of societies, but certainly Tibetan society has had its issues. No large-scale warfare with its neighbors. Not really, smaller things, but. So what then? What needs to happen? I would say that part of the first claim would be, it's got to be bottom up. Right? And the second claim would be, I think, that it has to be like the next stage of cultural evolution for us might possibly be that we have to be able to have large-scale societies without needing some kind of myth that we think is true.
Yeah. But
Right?
you have to have an ethos that allows you to penetrate that solidity.
Yes. Yeah. I don't say I know what that looks like, and I don't think, you could say Buddhist Tantra has kind of tried that, but not really. It's complicated. One of the interesting questions here is whether those large-scale societies always end up with dominant hierarchies. And once you have a dominant hierarchy, it's in the interest of the hierarchy to have that story that sustains the hierarchy be true, the absolute truth. So, maybe we need a kind of evolution that also lets us almost in some ways go back to things that were outcompeted in cultural evolution, supposedly, which were more distributed systems, which was the original Sangha, right? The original Buddhist Sangha was very much a distributed, non-hierarchical community. So that's all. I'll leave it at that.
So I think following up on this, John, is one of the really radical perspectives that Thich Nhat Hanh proposed in the early 1980s was that the future Buddha was the Sangha. And I think that that is exemplified in a certain way by the archetype of Avalokiteshvara with 10,000 eyes and 10,000 hands. 10,000 views, each eye is a different view. This is, one of the principles of complex adaptive systems is requisite diversity. And each eye represents a different perspective. And each hand is holding, a different instrument of liberation. And so it's not as if there's just one, Manjushri has her sword, so to speak. But Avalokiteshvara, for me, is the archetype of this distributed community with multiple views, requisite diversity, many upayas, many dharma doors. For example, there are very few Zen centers in the world that would, welcome wholeheartedly, as we do, people from other traditions. We were talking this morning, Dekila and I, about, and John, that this program we did right after the pandemic hit called Awakened Action, just incredible women from all, sectors, whether it's Jane Fonda or, Joanna Macy, Rebecca Solnit, and so on. And one of our, real stars was Heather McTeer Toney, who, comes from the rural South from Mississippi, was mayor of Greenville, Mississippi, worked in the Obama administration in the EPA. And was it the EPA? Yeah, EPA. And who is just, a prophetic voice, Black voice, in the environmental movement. And she is one of our teachers here at Upaya. We just, we value that integrity and authenticity of voice. It is one instrument of liberation that she carries. And just as Dekila and John come from the Tibetan tradition, and I welcome it because it's influenced actually how we practice here at Upaya, where there is a profound emphasis on the cultivation of bodhicitta. In Zen, it's actually implicit, but it's not as explicit, as articulated as it is in the Tibetan world. And because I did a lot of Tibetan practice with Chadru Tukul Rinpoche and then Gyalpa Rinpoche and so on, and I went, when I foster a context of practice, which this place is about, this is an element which actually we're going to bring into focus. We're going to actually make this a really important element of the ethos of practice here at Upaya as a place of socially engaged Buddhism. So this, I think, is our relationship. Also, as the conversation Sean and I are talking about what we're going to do next year, we're thinking about doing Dzogchen and Zen, but because, as when we meet, we recognize that but probably we're not going to do it because we have another idea. But that's, or maybe we'll do that and something else. It's the problem with John and Dekila and me. We've got all kinds of plans. What made God laugh? Well, I hope the residents enjoy it. I hope they laugh too. But you'll see Tibetans practicing like this, with the gaze like this. In Zen, we practice like this. So we ask you to be congruent with our style you know, when we're in the deep context of our Zen practice, knowing one of the things I think Dekila asked yesterday, Roshi, do you have any practices that you do for specific, you know, situations and so on and so forth? And I said, we don't do that in Zen. We open to things as they are. That's what shikantaza is. You know, we don't apply an antidote. We actually practice radical inclusivity, but non-stickiness. Phenomena rising moment by moment. And also the, you know, the posture. This is, you know, Tibetan style. This is Vipassana style. And Zen has this kind of uprightness. And that is, you know, we hold that posture as a community in the context of the culture of this place. But I actually want to just do a little swivel. Can I do that?
Swivel away.
Well, I have problems because I find you so intoxicating, John. You know, really, honestly, I have so much fun. This is a kind of swivel back to a piece that we were touching in earlier, having to do with emergence, having to do with surprise, having to do with not knowing. And it's a story, actually, I read in one of Norman Fisher's book, and I just want to share the story because it's a story that really caught my attention. Apropos, that's why I've suddenly pulled out my computer, of our conversation of crazy wisdom in the midst of catastrophe. And that is why Putai, or one of the great Bodhisattvas, you know, has this kind of clownish aspect. So it's a story about a French surrealist poet during the Second World War named Robert Desnos. And he was a Jew. He joined the French underground resistance in their fight against the Nazis, and he was captured. And he was sent to various concentration camps. And then one day, Desnos and the men in the camp where he was were forced into a truck. They were crowded into a truck that was transporting prisoners from the barracks where they were being held. And the men understood where they were going because those trucks had come into that camp, loaded prisoners into the back of those trucks, and they had returned empty. And they knew that those people were put to death. Desnos and his friends were crowded into a truck. No one spoke. There was this feeling of pervasive dread. The mood that all shared was one of deep resignation. Their faces were grim. And then finally the truck arrived at its terrible destination. And the prisoners slowly and silently descended from the truck as if they were in some kind of dream or nightmare. The guards were also silent, and they were also affected by the mood of the men, of the prisoners. And then in the midst of this somberness, in the midst of this dread, something bizarre happened. The silence was suddenly interrupted. And Desnos, who's a poet, jumped up. He grabbed the hand of the man who was behind him, his nose almost touching the man's hand. His body was completely coiled, just tight with energy. And he began to read the man's palm. And he said, "Wow, you're going to have 3 children. This is so fantastic. And a beautiful wife. And you're going to be wealthy. This is so wonderful. And people were like, whoa. And the feeling, you know, began to be kind of contagious. And then first, you know, one man and then another in shock and bewilderment thrust out his hand. Each one received a similar prediction: long life, children, wealth, beautiful surroundings, peace, happiness, success, joy. And as Desnos, and you think this was an emergent experience. Desnos never planned this. You have to understand. There were causes and conditions that initiated a spontaneous act that was so bizarre, such a unicorn moment, that it completely changed the atmosphere, not only in the community of prisoners, but also in the community of guards. It was a kind of breaking all at once. The prisoners began to smile. They began to laugh. They were sort of clapping each other on the back, and they felt their burden was lifted and their reality was transformed for just a moment. But not only was their reality transformed, but also was the reality of the guards. Because they too had been living in this dark spell in which men were being marched off to slaughter. It had become normalized for them. But now, with this completely unprecedented, totally absurd event, there was a sudden shift in their reality. And this is critical. It's to understand. Completely unprescribed. This is what this act that Desnos engaged in, it was a Bodhisattva act. It was completely unprescribed. He had no plan to do this at all. It was an emergent experience. And the guards became kind of confused. They had been living only a moment before, as you had said, a reality, a view, a set of values, an ethos that suddenly shifted. They were no longer sure of what was real, what was true. And then what Norman was writing, he said, you know, perhaps their better natures, long suppressed in an effort to conform to the Nazi madness that had defined their world, which itself was an ethos, a reality that was believed in by an entire nation. And we're experiencing it in another way here. And it's happening in Gaza and Israel. Long numb to grief, long numb to guilt, but also something broke open that was stirred by Desnos's completely mad act. They no longer knew what to do. They couldn't go back to the plan. They marched the prisoners back into the truck and sent them back to the barracks. And these men, through Desnos's not knowing emergent action, were saved from execution. So I share that story with you because Bodhisattvas come in many rises. It is not just in the sort of glory of bejeweled headdresses and perfumed robes. And Desnos had no plan. We have to understand that our connection to this moment as it is, when we're in this Dzogchen Zen, if you will, moment of non-separateness, upaya emerges, the skillful action. It might not be an action that has us looking good, if you know what I mean, where we become nationally recognized with a Bodhisattva button, if you know what I'm saying, because we just did such a good thing and we're so darn nice. In order to facilitate a genuine phase shift, it has to be from a foundation that is unprescribed. It cannot be planned. And this is why we go back again and again to this vision of the Bodhisattva. The Bodhisattva's attitude is characterized, and this is again from Norman, by clarity, by the, just this absolutely profound capacity to see things clearly and to respond in a non-dual way. To one of the, upayas or skillful means, the hands of Avalokiteshvara. And this is what Ehe Dogen discovered in his experience of awakening. It was so clear to him in both Hotsu Bodai Shin, where Dogen wrote so radiantly about there is no other reason to practice than in order to benefit others. Hakuin, hundreds of years later, in his awakening, the same thing, had one awakening that was superficial, a pernicious awakening, and then had a second awakening in his 40s. He thought he had it in his 20s. And his teacher went, nope, sorry, go again. And he kept in the practice, and in his 40s, he had a second profound realization, and the rest of his life was completely, my life is only about benefiting others. This practice is only about benefiting others. And I think that hundreds of years after Hakuin, when Ambedkar, who was the one who was actually responsible for crafting the constitution of a free India, a Dalit who had this realization, my life is only about benefiting others, and he converted to Buddhism. And along with him, 380,000 untouchables joined him. Coming in a certain way as this moment in the life of the Buddha, when the Buddha, she gave precepts, shared precepts with a so-called untouchable and flattened out the system. Bodhisattva action, deep reformation of existing systems against the prevailing winds of hierarchy of that era. And Ambedkar of our, during, well, at least my lifetime, what Ambedkar did in his lifetime. And then you think about other extraordinary individuals, Thich Nhat Hanh and His Holiness, both losing their countries, being forced to flee, but becoming global figures with one message, the same message, the Bodhisattva message, not to hide out in your practice, but this is the deep roots of socially engaged Buddhism are individuals, these two individuals who had to flee their own countries. You think about adversity. It's not one child that you lost, it's the country that you lost. Still the grief of both is deep. What do we make of it? What have we learned from it? Aiken Roshi, who was really an incredible educator who started the Buddha's Peace Fellowship. Sulak Shivaraksha in Thailand is just an outrageous, taking his stick, and we're old friends, taking his stick and shaking it at the king of Thailand. Part of this collateral network of socially engaged Buddhists at the international level, mostly located in Asia. Mahagosananda, we were talking about Mahagosananda. John and I both had really beautiful experiences walking in the killing fields of Cambodia, seeking reconciliation with the Khmer Rouge, or burning in Auschwitz, Rwanda, or in the streets of New York, sitting with the homeless, or Koshin going down to the hospice here in Santa Fe, or those of us who have worked in the prison system. Not turning away from the charnel grounds in our society and hiding out in the Pure Land, so to speak, but of actually working those charnel grounds to recognize one's own charnel grounds that exist in one's own mind and heart. Because charnel grounds are not only the place of suffering. In the external world, the forests that have been cut down, the rivers that are polluted, but also the pollution of our own hearts and minds, and the pollution and the cutting down of our old growth hearts. So this practice that we have been exploring in various ways to understand the coming Buddha or the present Buddha is the Sangha, but it's not just the fourfold Sangha of monks, nuns, laymen, and laywomen. It is the Sangha of all species. It is taking the club of practicing Buddhism and popping it open through the incredible view, for example, of what Dekila has been doing, Joanna Macy, Wendy Johnson, Roxanne Swensel, and so many extraordinary, excuse me, women in the environmental field. And I just encourage everybody who is, here to go back into Upaya's Wisdom Library and look at the talks by these, including Jane Fonda, Rebecca Solnit, Awakened Action, to hear the prophetic but sharp voices of women who have speak for the whole earth, including the human species. So this is what we have been touching in today. Your individual Bodhisattva heart, yet as John and Dekila and others have reflected, to recognize that we cannot do this alone. Avalokiteshvara has 10,000 eyes, 10,000 hands. And one of the powers of being in a community of practice is that we get to know each other in an uncommon way. Because, for example, in Sesshin, which we're coming up to on the 1st of December, we move out of our socialized behaviors and ways of communicating to drop into a practice that allows us to actually expand our subjectivity to include everything in the context of our practice, every person, every footfall, every chopstick, every bowl, understanding that we are not separate from each other. And what happens when we move into the experience of entrainment, which Buddhism allows us to do through the medium of this practice, out of our sniggly little individual picky-poo-ness. It's just like, get over it, folks.
That was a technical term, sniggly little people.
Exactly. Where we experience what Glasman Roshi and what Shanti Deva, interbeing or one body. One body. We are one body with this earth. We are one body through the medium of our practice. That is Bodhisattva ethos, Bodhisattva attitude. We can't separate ourselves from Israel or Palestine or from Russia or Ukraine, from the racists down the block. Just as Thich Nhat Hanh, years ago, after Rodney King was bludgeoned, bloody in Los Angeles, came to Omega, there were hundreds of people there, and he said, I didn't want to come to your country. And I sat there and I thought, I can relate. This is the charnel of the ground, though, where we are called to practice. He came, we are here. And in the spirit of please call me by my true names, where the young girl raped by the sea pirate, not separate, Ty sat up on that stage and he said, I'm Rodney King, but I'm also the man who beat Rodney King. And to understand the man or men who beat Rodney King, that too, we keep coming back to this point, is also suffering. And compassion is not about not holding the perpetrators to accountability, whether it's your children or whether it's the head of state, but to understand the nature of suffering and to do whatever you can individually, but as communities of action, to cultivate an ethos that is courageous and non-self-centered. And this whole thing in the Western world about I, me, my, mine, whether it's real estate or our economic system or our individual personalities, living in our little dreaded cages of opinions and attitudes that degrade our potential. And practice is about dismantling those cages. But we become comfortable in those cages. That is the terrible thing that is just like, no, no. Like Ty said, I put my face in my two hands, like, really? You can't, no. But to recognize the cage and dismantle the cage of the ego that is causing immense suffering for oneself and a joyless, loveless, angry, anxious, fear-filled world. It's an imperative now. Get off the victim role. Get off the perpetrator role. Move out of pathological altruism, trying to rescue the world and trash yourself in the meantime. And understand this experience, what Bernie talked about, this experience of we are one body. And how can we transform the actual social systems that are perpetuating the suffering, even of the most wealthy and privileged? Not only the suffering of those on the margins. So in that spirit, we are at a paused moment for, we're going to take a break.
Do you want to do any questions before the break?
Oh,
Should we do a few questions
okay.
before the break?
Yeah.
And then, yeah. Maybe, yeah, so first, thank you so much, Roshi.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Surprise yourself. No, be Desnos. Really. Robert Desnos.
Let's, even though we are going to take a break shortly, but this might be an opportunity for us to have a few questions, because after the break, we're going to move into our Bodhisattva vow ceremony. So I think we should try to do some questions now, if you have any. There's a question here. Do we have the microphone? Malini.
Not more than a question. First of all, my gratitude to all of you. And I come from a different culture too. So I look at things, see things differently too. So my way of acting now is totally constructing myself to understand the other. Because even in practicing community or outside, if the society's grown or they know everything or they're superior and all these things, when it comes into place, it is ingrained, it is there. So in any way, when they look at, or when we say something, oh, I studied in the book or whatever, intellectually, they are very well aware of it. But have we gone beyond? What is Roshi kept saying all the time, we have to go beyond to understand. Intellectually, I can sit here and go and do my same thing. It doesn't mean anything. How do we take it off the cushion? That's been my practice, but I always have to step back and listen where this is coming from. That is a practice that I know if I go in that level, I'm not hearing. But many times, all the activists, I know people, in goodwill, they're doing it, but they are not hearing.
Yeah.
They are not listening anywhere. So working in this situation is hard. It's not, I always keep that not knowing is the most intimate. Yes, that's the only one I keep up. But I'm working with all my neighbors or anything. This in group, you didn't talk about it. Of having that, you talked about it. And, they belong to that and they assume that they have to act that way. They are not coming out. So it's breaking that is the hard one. So now for me is listening. That's all I can do.
Beautiful.
But I cannot judge that person because that in group has taught them. We can get it out. So it's my struggle, but I work with it.
Right on, Malini.
Thank you, but I really grateful. And I told her, mothers are the great wisdom. My mother taught me death and dying, and I was 14 when my father died, and impermanence. That's how we learn. The societies are different, It's okay, but we can. I'm learning every day. Thank you.
Oh, Malini. Thank you.
Do you want to try anything online?
Let's see. There's an online hand. Sorry, I can't see.
Madrone? How about Madrone?
Yeah. Madrone? Sorry, I can't. Madrone, hi.
Mute myself.
Still muted.
Muted.
Okay. Am I unmuted now?
Yeah, but
Okay.
1 second.
Okay.
okay, try now.
Go
Can you
ahead.
hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, this is so amazing, but also so overwhelming. And like, just trying to figure out, are we just supposed to sit a lot more to like find our way out of it? Like,
Madrone, I love you.
you.
She just finished a practice period here. It's an old resident. Yes. Cut to the chase. Love you, Madrone.
What do you say, Roshi?
Well, Madrone and I are old friends. Madrone lived here, but actually, having a strong practice, but also having a relationship with a teacher who's ruthless.
Yes. Yes.
You know any?
I tell you, they're hard to come by.
I have this image of Roshi as an airline attendant. Sit down.
Put
Take
that
the water.
seatbelt off. Actually, take that seatbelt off. But also, you're a social worker. You're working with people who are suffering all the time. The residents here, as you know, you were a resident here for years. People come here because they're suffering. They're aware something is off. So, we come alongside. We come alongside our own suffering, but in service to others, we come alongside others. And that's really where we learn. And we come back to the cushion. As I said, the charnel ground is not only in the hospice, it's in the community of practice, and it's in between your ears. So you just keep that practice going in all the contexts where you have access.
I don't know if this will help, but there is as Malini said, bringing it off the cushion, and you're obviously doing that as a social worker. But it can be like completely overwhelming to do that every moment of the day. So sometimes what can be helpful is to have a time, whether it's the next morning or in the evening, if that works for you, to just sort of review a highlight or two of what happened in the day. And I really encourage you to have actually both a kind of, find a highlight that's a moment of learning, like you'll know that. And one of the indicators for me with that is usually regret, not guilt, by the way, but regret. Like I go, gee, I could have done that even right in the moment. Sometimes I thought, I could be doing this better. And then just sort of review that and say, okay, how? Like, what did I learn from this? Just one moment. But then also very important to have a moment where you go, yeah, I stuck to that one. Like I did pretty well there. And to reinforce like what did work. So that's and to integrate that kind of moment of reflection then into your practice, as that can happen before you do your formal practice or after. That can be helpful. That's a kind of a style that comes out of what we call the mind training tradition. And it can be helpful to just have that moment of review, but super important to make it both like learning moments and also moments of rejoicing. And you can also rejoice, by the way, in what you observe. It can, rejoice in your own thing, but also if you saw someone do something like, wow, that was really Bodhisattva activity, to review that too is really powerful. Because it inspires us.
I don't think there's a separation. This idea that practice is on the mat and then you get up and go do your job. I think the job is the practice. You bring it into when you're sitting on the mat and you're doing your dedication or your aspiration prayer, you bring your day work into that aspiration prayer. And the manifestation of your Bodhisattva vow is the work you've chosen to do, right? So creating that barrier actually limits how you're working in these two fields. It is the same field.
That's very Zen of you.
Yeah. I have teachers that have influenced.
Denny. Yeah.
I'm Denny, a resident here, and thanks for this. This is fantastic. I have a question about the role of an artist in all this, because that's what I am, although it's hard to claim that. especially in the face of so many people who are in the trenches, and it feels like I'm not. It's hard to claim the power or the gift that I've been given. And it's also hard to think like, is this all about my ego to share what I write? And yet it feels like something calls me to share it, that it's not mine, it was given to me. And I'm just wondering if you have any reflections on how to achieve that.
Well, Denny is a poet bodhisattva. And one of my favorite things is, I wasn't on the WhatsApp resident group for years. I think they've tried to keep me out of it.
Probably a good idea.
But finally, they let me in the club. And then I started reading your poetry. And I realized it was the expression that you give in relation to how you perceive others is so profound. It's uplifting, and not only for the other person, but for all of us. As an artist, that's bodhisattva attitude, bodhisattva activity. I'm so grateful you're here. Really.
No, I think we can take a break.
John's just given us permission. One more question. Okay. Hey, Ethan.
Hey.
Do you want to stand up?
Yes. Hi, guys. I'm Ethan. So I'm wondering what you guys have to say about what American culture might have to offer, if anything, to this whole movement that we're talking about, whether that's science or some aspect of the basic freedoms that we enjoy. And I think, is your name Barbara over there?
Yeah.
Barbara's question made me think about that when we were sort of like thinking about what happens now. And as I learn more about Zen and learn more about Buddhism, I see this pattern of merging. Buddhism merges with what it comes into contact with. And so I'm just curious of what you think Buddhism in America is merging with now.
So if I could just say a few things. First of all, I don't even know what American culture is. If I were a Black person, I'd have a different view. Or if I were an Indigenous person, I'd have a different view. If I were a Hispanic, like in our local community, or Troy, who's one of our priests in the local community, Fernandez, local view. So, one of the things is often we think American culture is our ethnic group or in-group. But part of what we have to do is spin ourselves out of the club. Our white-skinned or black-skinned or red-skinned or yellow-skinned or no-skinned, whatever club, and to realize there's extraordinary diversity here. And wildly enough, there's a kind of tolerance, strangely enough, for that diversity. And it is added robustness to our culture. No matter how messed up and racist and how horrifying the genocide has been, for example, Indigenous peoples, the communities that we live next door to. But there are some things that have come out of the West that are touching Buddhism that are really significant. And one of them is feminism. I tell you, this is really radical. Another is, inclusivity in relation to sexual identity. Really radical. There are monks now in Japan Never would you hear this in the old days, who are trans and out. It's really like, okay. Socially engaged Buddhism, which actually originated, of course, in the Sangha of the Buddha, but grew most strongly in the Theravadan world, has been given a huge boost in Western culture. Notions of democracy that aren't functioning well in this country, but are being put to the test in Buddhist communities in this country, and are the top-down patriarchal systems that are characteristic of what is extant in Asian culture and has been for centuries, is being challenged. And then psychology, which has, everything has two sides. Our psychology has us awfully absorbed in our pity party. But the other side is that Western psychology has become something that is really important in terms of a vehicle of transformation, particularly as Western culture and Western economics has influenced other countries and other societies. How do you get over the ego trip that you see in Asia now? So there are many aspects of Western culture per se, but I say Western culture is not one thing. I can say that as an anthropologist. And so what we have to do is to, sort of open up, I think your question is so great, our view to understand if we were Roxanne Swensel up there in Santa Clara Pueblo, we'd be speaking from, a completely different ethos than, say, Malini, who's American, but from Sri Lanka, has Sri Lankan roots, or Wendy, who's American, but her roots are in Hong Kong and so forth. So, how do we actually move out of our club, so to speak? And that's one of the things that, by the way, one of the virtues of certain aspects of Western culture, there is a kind of diversity here, which actually has allowed us to see that there is no such thing as American culture.
Just to add a little bit to that, I would say, so one of the things that I think is exactly that what's unusual historically about the United States is partially because of various technologies actually that enabled the rapid colonization of the United States. And then the certain kinds of economic forces arising in the early modern period that were driving a kind of set of impartial markets that were not based upon kin relationships or that kind of trust, but where you developed impartial, impersonal trust, which allowed markets like, our stock market to emerge, where billions of dollars are traded and you have no idea who you're trading with. And so those forces led to the emergence of the United States, in which tremendous diversity somehow needed to work together. And that, I think, has, as Roshi's pointed out, that's what has tremendous potential. The problem, I think, one of the ways of thinking about the fundamental problems in the United States, there's a couple of them. One of them is that while that emerged, it's like e pluribus unum. There's a one out of the many. And the one is actually a problem. Because that is then this idea which was really coming from the pre-modern period, where there's a transition into nationhood, we're going to have to create like single entities that everybody is committed to and will die for. So that oneness then requires this kind of, myth that we believe it, that we share, that makes us all the same, all one, and that is actually just an abstraction. Just like the United States is an abstraction. You can't it's not like you get to the Canadian border, some parts of which are not fenced, and when you walk over it, it's like, oh, I feel Canadian now. It's like, that doesn't happen. So that oneness is actually a problem. So being able to collaborate without having to be one is something that we have to get to. The second thing is that the emergence of those impartial markets and so on really go with what's called weird, Western educated, industrialized, rich democracies. And I encourage you to have a look at Joe Heinrich's book, The Weirdest People in the World, especially the first couple of chapters. Because there are psychological features of being weird, and not all of them, just like Roshi said, not everyone in the United States is equally weird, right? And not just because of subcultures, but for other reasons as well. But there's a kind of dominant weirdness, and there are some really unfortunate features psychologically of being weird. And one of them is a sense of hyper-individualism, and therefore actually alienation and loneliness.
Yeah.
And another is a sense of like, what that goes with, to make those impartial markets, you have to kind of cut kinship ties. And which means that then you no longer feel like that sort of sense that you find among indigenous people, like everyone is my kin. The world is my kin, not just humans. That's lost.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of potential, but there are also a lot of challenges.
Well, we have a reality. Ethan, that's a great question. And we could stir with it longer, but we have the reality of time. And I think that we should allow a very efficient bathroom break. How long, Senko? 5 minutes. Okay.
Back at 11:20. Can we do back at 11:20?
Yes.
Can we do that?
Yeah, 11:20.
6 minutes.
Okay. We would love to earth to everybody. If you can hear me, raise your hand. Oh, thank you, Senko. That hand came up slowly. Yeah, remember that trick from school. So we'd like to invite us to come close. So if you could bring your cushions together, wallflowers, abandon the wall. For us to do this, well, we need to be really connected. And there's one cushion up here. Who would like that? Senko, you're coming in? Yep. This is so much better. It's like cuddle time, you know?
Okay, and put them. Okay. Shall I get them?
You know, this is
Okay.
so I'm going to invite us to allow the breath to be our anchor for a moment. And also, you have to smile, because honestly, if you receive the vows with any taste of self-righteousness, it destroys the spell. Okay. See, look at Skyla's already smiling. And the kind of heart mind, this is Wendy and Nicole's beautiful 2-year-old Bodhisattva baby. Did you say Wendy? God, Noah. That was a joyful conflation. Close, but not quite. Yeah, very close. One's half Chinese, the other's fully. I just, no. Okay. See, you all are laughing. And it's what Dekila said. When one receives an empowerment, one receives it with joy. And when you receive it with self-righteousness or some kind of heaviness, it doesn't stick. I mean, that's the curious, that's right. So, and as John has said, the generous heart mind, the first perfection, the first paramita is of generosity. And it's this attitude of profound appreciation. Maizumi Roshi said, appreciate your life. Just bombs are not falling on our heads. Yeah. Be grateful. And let ourselves as a community of practice, online and here in this space, be resourced by our good fortune to be together safely and in such a space where this aspiration to actualize our Bodhisattva nature and to bring one drop of water to the burning forest of this world, just on our little parrot wings, right? Even just one drop can invite the blessing of cooling rain.
So we're going to be conferring the Bodhisattva vows. And as you know, the traditions that we're involved in here actually converge very strongly. So I appreciate the way Upaya Zen Center is so open to multiple traditions, but also there is a way in which, especially the non-dual traditions of Tibet, Mahamudra and Dzogchen, and Zen have not only converged kind of conceptually and in terms of their practices, maybe postures are different and so on, but really those practices converge strongly, but even historically they have connections. And of course, both of these traditions or multiple traditions really also trace back to sources in India. And the Bodhisattva vow has different lineages of conferring the vow. And we're going to confer the vow through the lineage of Shantideva, which has become very important here for Upaya Zen Center, and then also through the vows developed by Chöyi in the Chentai school that you're already familiar with. So we've only provided you with the printed version of Shantideva's version. So it is traditional to start, first of all, by invoking the presence of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions, to celebrate our sense of being together here in a special sacred space, a space of community, a space that is blessed by years of practice by many Bodhisattvas, and then to make offerings. And here I will recite from Shantideva what's called the 7-limb prayer, extracted from his text, The Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. And after I make this offering, then we will move on to refuge recitation. And we'll start again with Shantideva's version, and then I'll do that in Sanskrit, and you'll repeat after me, and then we'll do it in English with Dekila. And then I will ask you to request the vow of your spiritual friends. And as spiritual friends, we are here to, in a sense, transmit through the generations what we have also received.
to help you to the extent we can as guides, to support you as companions in the practice. And an important thing to know about the Bodhisattva vow is this is one of the vows that lay people can confer, actually. It's even a vow you can take yourself, and so you can also use this with we have the daily recitation of the 4 vows here in Upaya. And so this is an important idea of kind of refreshing the vow even on a daily basis. So I'll begin now in the presence of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions. I'll begin now with an offering prayer and a prayer of celebration of their presence.
And I'm going to be offering incense and incensing the prayer cords while John is doing this.
Buddham gacchami sharanam yavana bodhi mandata dharmam gacchami sharanam bodhisatta ganantata manjugosha parvurtayah pujiyanti yatha janan tata tata gatanatan saputran pujiyamyaham atha param patishtantam pujamegaha manoramaha Turiya Sangiti Megascha Savasattva Praharshanaha Swaranga Sagarai Stotraihi Stamichaham Ganodadin Stuti Sangiti Megascha Sambhavantveshu Ananyata Savakshetranu Sankyaischa Pranamai Pranamamyaham Savatradvakatan Buddhan Sahadharma Ganotaman Vinyapyami sambuddhan sarvadikshu vyavastitan mahakarunikanschapi bodhisattvam kritanjalihi anarimati sansari janmanyatraiva va punaha yamaya pashuna papam kritam karitameva va yachanamoritam kimchit apaghataya mohatah taratyam deshayami paschatapena tapitah Sansara dukkha nirmoksham anamode sharirinam bodhisattvata buddhatvam anamode chitainam chittotpada samudrascha savasattva sukavahan savasattva hitadanan anamode shasinam chittotpada samudrascha savasattva sukavahan savasattva hitadanan Anamode Chasasinam Sarvasu Dikshu Sambuddhan Pratyami Kritanjalihi Dharma Pradipam Kurvantu Mahaduka Prapatinam Nirvatu Kamans Jajjanan Yachyami Kritanjalihi Kaparanantantishtantu Mabudhandam Midam Jagad Evam Sarvam Midam Kritva Yamai Saritam Shubham Tenisam sarva sattvanam sarvadhuka prashanti kurt. Om Swasti. And now we will begin with the recitation of the refuge formula, the refuge prayer from the Bodhicharya Avatara of Shantideva. Please repeat after me. We will recite 3 times, once with me in Sanskrit, twice with Dekila in English. Buddham gacchami sharanam
Gacchami sharanam
yavada bodhi mandatah
yavada bodhi mandata
dharmam gacchami sharanam
dharmam gacchami sharanam
bodhisattva ganantata
bodhisattva ganantata.
In the Buddha, I seek refuge.
In the Buddha, I seek refuge.
Until reaching awakening's core.
Until reaching awakening's core.
In the Dharma, I seek refuge.
In the Dharma, I seek refuge.
And so too in the Bodhisattva host.
And so too in the Bodhisattva host.
In the Buddha, I seek refuge.
In the Buddha, I seek refuge.
Until reaching awakening's core.
Until reaching awakening's core.
In the Dharma, I seek refuge.
In the Dharma, I seek refuge.
And so too in the Bodhisattva's host.
And so too in the Bodhisattva's host.
And now, all of us gathered here together today, it is up to you to request your spiritual friends to convey the vow. So if you wish, you may repeat after me. O spiritual friends,
O spiritual friends,
please bestow upon me
please bestow upon me
the precious vow of the Bodhisattva.
the precious vow of the Bodhisattva.
With that in mind, then, we will now recite the verses of receiving the vow. We will recite these 3 times, the first in Sanskrit and then the next 2 in English. Each time we recite, Shantideva's version will also then recite, Roshi will lead us in the recitation of Zheyi's version. So please repeat after me. Yatha grahitam sugatar
Yata grihitam sugatar
bodhicittam purattanaihi
bodhicitta paratanahi
te bodhisattva shikshayam
te bodhisattva shikshayam
anupovyaya stitaha
anapuryaya tasataha
tadvat upadayami yesha
tadyatvapadaya nesha
bodhicittam jagadhite
bodhicittam jagatite
tadvadeva cha taha shikshaha
tatvadeva cha
Shiksha.
shikshishami yathakramam.
shikshishami yathakramam. Just as the ancient Buddhas. Oh, okay. Yeah. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to transform them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The awakened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to transform them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The awakened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to transform them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The awakened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it.
And now we'll read in English just one time the formula from Shantideva. Please repeat after me. Just as the ancient Buddhas upheld bodhicitta, just as they gradually engaged in the Bodhisattva practice, so too for the sake of the world, will I give birth to bodhicitta. So too will I progressively train in the Bodhisattva practice. And now I will ask you, has it been received? And you will say, yes. Has it been received?
Yes.
And now you say, I will say, this is the way, and you respond, so it is. This is the way.
So it is.
Congratulations, Bodhisattvas.
Take some.
Yes. And now we will give you what are called, in Tibetan, sunku. They are protection cords. They symbolize your commitment as a bodhisattva. You can put them around your wrist. You can put them around your neck. You can put them on in a special place, whatever you like. And this also is just a reminder, kind of memento of your vow, and also said to be protective from negative mental states. So please come up and we'll each hand them out to you. So in the interest of doing it quickly. So.
Would you like one?
Come on up. Don't be shy, Ethan.
Well, I'm dragging the
Koshin
behind me. Yes, please.
In the pocket?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Casey. Jitsu. Ando.
Not stepping on anything.
Bushin.
Anyone I missed? Okay.
Yapchi.
Oh, there's so many of them. Oh, you are so welcome, Kyla.
Thank you. Bushin.
Before we part, just a couple of words about the vow. There are a different sense of what the precepts of the vow are. We're here at Upaya, so it's important to follow the way that Upaya understands and implements those vows. So I'm sure you will be able to find already online lots of teachings to that effect. There's also, in the Indo-Tibetan tradition, different accounts of the Bodhisattva vows. And I highly recommend actually the Alex Berzin's website, the Berzin Archives, that has a great account of the Bodhisattva vows. I think it's called Study Buddhism, I think is the name of the website. We'll try to make sure to get it to you, but it's Alex Berzin, my old friend and a great scholar, Berzin. So if you're interested in the Indo-Tibetan version, but again, we're here at Upaya, so the basics you could say of the vows, the most, we've already talked about it. Of course, we seek to not do harm, but especially we seek to be of service to benefit. And that means really that we're seeking to do that for self and other, actually. And when we say to do benefit, that means to the best of our ability, right? And you could say a kind of underlying principle here is also to constantly seek to grow and to not abandon that sense of no matter how tough it gets and no matter how much you might beat yourself up, to really accept that, yes, you're a bodhisattva and you can and will become awakened. So that's a core, you can say, of the vow and the practice from the Indo-Tibetan standpoint.
And then the vows that we chant were crafted by Chi, who's the founder of the Tendai School. And those 4 vows are vows that are shared in the Zen tradition, but actually have their roots in China in the 600s. And Chi was an extraordinary scholar, synthesizing Buddhist perspectives in into a very remarkable system. And very few people know that the vows come from the founder of the Tendai School, the school that Ehe Dogen actually first practiced in when he was a teenager. And those vows, as we chant them here, were revisioned by Glassman Roshi and by me. And the creations are numberless. Instead of sentient beings, This is creations, including the creations of our own mind. So, we're working to benefit, all beings, but also those little, ravagers up there between our ears who are hijacking our joy and our sense of love for all beings. And then delusions are inexhaustible. The Chinese is appropriate, is we vow to put an end to them. I said, Boini, you don't put an end to them, you transform them. And we argued for a year about that, and I won. I'm so glad. But it's not true to the Chinese. It's like you put an end to them. No, we work it. We learn from it. What are we learning here? We vow to transform. Reality is boundless. We vow to perceive it. The awakened way, instead of saying the Buddha way, what is it to wake up? The awakened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. In other words, this is in the body, in our service to awakening in the world and to benefit others. So that is the sort of ground of the 4 vows that are the ballast for our practice and life here at Upaya and service to others. And in the spirit of conclusion, bringing the 4 lines that His Holiness often recites by Shantideva, but in a rendering that is particular as we conclude. For as long as space remains, and as long as beings remain, may I too remain to end the sorrows in this world. Thank you, Skyla. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, our online Bodhisattvas, our celestial entities. We're so grateful you could be with us in this time. And deep thanks to Noah and Bonnie, keeping us moving. Beloved Stephanie and Lulu, who work in the office, and our amazing residents. How's the food been? I mean, hey. And, as I said at the beginning, we're just kind of learning how to do this again. This is like we rode this bicycle for years and then got off it. And I can tell you, as an old person, I was good on the bicycle when I was younger. I'd need another lesson. So thank you for helping us learn how to receive you more gracefully. And we invite you to come here, explore residency, and also volunteer here. And as Noah said, your donations really make a difference. We have limited the numbers who can come here, keeping all in good health in the reality of the situation, which affects our capacity to be efficient in our all the things that we're doing. So your donations are really important to us. And finally, to my old friends, beloveds. Yeah.
I want it. How come he's always in the center?
Yeah, I don't know. You guys put me here. It wasn't my idea.
We figured, I'll tell you what our thought was, that the power of the feminine would uphold you. So we did our best.
In Sanskrit, you say, anugrahitosmi, I feel upheld.
Great. And we hold all of you.
Yeah.
So we encourage you to leave your rooms immaculate. It will be great grace for our residents, really, in the bathroom, really please. And then we're gathering for lunch. I'll be at lunch if you want me to sign books. And also Wendy's book will be there, wonderful book, Inner Practice of Medicine. And then John and Dekila have to depart at 12:30. So that's the reality. But Buddha willing, they'll be back. Thank you
Infinite
very
chorus.
much.
We meet again and again.
And I'm gonna take Dekila and John over to the new building, which is not done yet, but it will be one day. Thank you, everybody. And we're gonna restore the Zendo and do all that. Yes, yes. Okay. I'm gonna take our peeps. Bye, I'll see you at lunch.